All right, buckle up, because today we're taking a deep dive into a world that I think we all feel like we know, the world of Lisa Marie Presley. But, we're ditching the tabloids for this one, going straight to the source. Lisa Marie, in her own words, from the memoir, From Here to the Great Unknown. It was actually put together by her daughter, Riley Keough, after Lisa Marie's death.
Yeah, and what's so powerful about this book is you really do hear Lisa Marie's voice. Like, it's not filtered, it's raw, it's honest, and at times it's really, really heartbreaking.
There's a vulnerability right from the start that really just pulled me in. It made me want to understand Lisa Marie as her own person, not just as Elvis's daughter. And speaking of Elvis, her childhood at Graceland is, well, it's not exactly what you might picture.
It's really not. I mean, it's this wild mix of like Southern tradition and then rock and roll extravagance. She talks about sneaking into the kitchen late at night with her cousins for these giant feasts and like driving a golf cart over people's feet. It's almost like a normal childhood, but with Elvis Presley as your dad.
It's so interesting, right? Those glimpses of normal in this totally extraordinary life.
Mm-hmm.
You really get the sense that even surrounded by fame, what Lisa Marie really wanted was connection, belonging.
Yeah, and that makes the impact of Elvis's death even more profound. I mean, she was only 9 years old, and the way she describes that day, the aftermath, it stays with you.
It's clear that loss just became this major force in her life. And it's not just losing Elvis, it's the way that she and her mother, Priscilla, dealt with that grief, or, maybe didn't deal with it. That really shapes so much of the story.
Absolutely. There's this sense that they were both trying to find their own way through, this really dark time, and their paths just went in different directions. Lisa Marie talks about finding some answers in Scientology, which gave her this sense of community, but then also brought a whole other set of complications.
It's fascinating how her search for meaning, for something to hold on to, how that seems to play out in her relationships too.
Totally. I mean, her marriages, particularly the one to Michael Jackson, were just constantly scrutinized by the media. But what comes through in the book is this shared experience of being different, understanding the pressures of fame in a way that most people just never could.
It's almost like they were trying to create their own world together, like a refuge from all the attention.
Right. But even that couldn't protect them from, life's complexities or their own personal struggles.
And I think that's where Lisa Marie's story becomes really relatable. Beyond the celebrity, she was dealing with addiction, heartbreak, the pressure of living up to this incredible legacy.
Yeah, you see this yearning for a simpler life, especially when she becomes a mother. She talks about moving to England, trying to shield her kids from the spotlight.
But life had other plans. The loss of her son, Benjamin, is this huge turning point in the memoir. You can just feel the rawness of her grief, how much it shook her.
It's devastating.
And that's where I'm going to leave you for now on the edge of this incredibly personal journey. I don't want to spoil anything, but I will say that From Here to the Great Unknown is so much more than just a celebrity memoir. It's a story about what it means to be human, about love and loss and searching for peace in the middle of all the chaos of life.
Lisa Marie's voice is so powerful. So honest. It really makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about her, and maybe even about yourself.
It's true. So if you're looking for a book that will stay with you long after you finish it, I highly recommend checking out Lisa Marie's story in her own words. We'll be back in just a bit to dive into some of the most fascinating parts of this book.
But be warned, once you start this journey, you might find yourself wanting to go all the way from here to the great unknown.
So we left off talking about Lisa Marie and that search for meaning, that search for something solid to hold on to. It's like that search just kind of infused everything in her life, from her relationships to her spiritual explorations.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you get the sense that being Elvis's daughter, inheriting that legacy, it was as much a burden as it was a privilege. And in a way, her love life, her relationships, it's almost like a reflection of that struggle.
That's such a good point. I mean,
Yeah.
think about her marriage to Michael Jackson. I mean, that was a global spectacle. But in the book, she takes away all the hype, all the sensationalism, and just talks about their shared understanding of fame, the isolation that came with it.
Exactly. It's like they saw in each other a kindred spirit, someone who got it, who understood what it meant to live under that kind of microscope. And I think that's why their relationship, even with all the ups and downs, really resonated with so many people.
But even in finding that connection with Michael, there was this underlying feeling of them wanting to escape,
Yeah.
to create their own little world away from the public eye.
Oh, absolutely. And that desire for a simpler, more grounded life really comes out when Lisa Marie becomes a mother. You see this shift in her priorities, this protectiveness over her kids.
There's this really sweet story about her and her first husband, Riley Keough. They took their kids to Hawaii to renew their vows, and it sounds like pure joy, like a moment of real normalcy in the middle of all this craziness.
It's such a beautiful story, and it says so much about the kind of mother she wanted to be. She wanted to give her children the stability and love that she always craved, that sense of belonging that always felt just out of reach for her.
And then her decision to move to England with her children, it makes even more sense. It's like she was actively trying to break free from that pattern, that legacy of fame that seemed to follow her everywhere.
Right, but as you keep reading, you start to realize that escaping the past, escaping your own demons, it's not always so easy.
And the memoir doesn't shy away from those darker parts of Lisa Marie's story, her struggles with addiction, the just devastating loss of her son Benjamin. Those events really cast a shadow over the rest of the book.
They do, and yet even in those moments of darkness, you see these glimpses of her resilience, her strength, her love for her children, for the kids who were still living it, just shines through.
She was determined to find her way back to the light, even though it was a really painful journey.
Absolutely, and I think that's what makes From Here to the Great Unknown so powerful. It's not a fairy tale,
Yeah.
It's a raw and honest look at a woman trying to deal with all the complexities of life, the weight of expectations, and her own search for truth.
And I think what I found so compelling was how Lisa Marie used her own experiences to connect with the reader, on a deeper level. She doesn't hide her vulnerabilities, and by doing that, it makes you confront your own.
It's like she's saying, hey, I've been through some really tough times, and if I can keep going, maybe you can too. And that message, that shared human experience, that's what stays with you after you finish the book.
You're so right. It's not just about her being a celebrity. It's about the human being behind the persona. It's about the struggles that we all face, no matter who we are or where we come from.
Exactly, and in a way that makes Lisa Marie's story really inspiring. She didn't let the tragedies define her. She kept fighting. She kept searching for meaning right up until the very end.
And that's why I think it's so important for people to hear her story in her own words, to get past all the headlines, all the tabloid stuff, and really understand the woman who was Lisa Marie Presley.
So if you're ready to go on that journey, to really dive into the heart and soul of this woman who was so much more than just a celebrity, I highly recommend picking up From Here to the Great Unknown. Be prepared, though. It's a roller coaster of emotions. It's not light reading. It's a deep dive into the human experience, and it might just make you rethink everything you thought you knew about fame and family and the strength of the human spirit.
We've talked about Lisa Marie's search for meaning and her really complicated relationships and the just awful tragedies she went through. But I think what really struck me reading From Here to the Great Unknown was how even in those dark times, there's this thread of hope.
It's true. It would have been easy to just focus on all the negative, but that's not what Lisa Marie does. She finds strength in some unexpected places. And in the end, her story is really a story about resilience.
One of the things that really showed me that was her relationship with her ex-husband, Riley Keough. They stayed incredibly close even after they divorced.
Yeah, it shows just how strong their bond was. In the book, she calls Danny her soulmate, someone who understood her like no one else could.
She even talks about how for a while she was going back and forth between Danny and Nicolas Cage, another big romance that was all over the tabloids. It's almost as she was trying to find her way back to herself, back to that feeling of stability and connection that she had with Danny.
Right. And you see that same longing for connection in her spiritual journey, too. She talks about finding some peace in Kabbalah, that ancient Jewish mystical tradition. It really resonated with her search for meaning.
It's interesting because even though she wasn't a Scientologist anymore, she still talks about her time in Scientology with respect. You can tell it had a big impact on how she saw the world.
I think it just reminds us that people's spiritual journeys, they're rarely straightforward. We change, we explore, we question, and sometimes we find comfort in the most unexpected places.
And through it all, her love for her children never wavered. There's this really touching part where she talks about taking her daughters to Graceland and showing them Elvis's private sanctuary, the place where she felt closest to him.
It's like she's passing on a legacy, but not one of fame or fortune. It's a legacy of love, of feeling connected to something bigger than yourself.
But as we know, her story takes a really heartbreaking turn with the death of her son, Benjamin. It's a wound that never really heals. And in the last part of the book, you feel the weight of that grief, just heavy on her.
And yet she finds comfort in writing and sharing her story. There's this sense of urgency in her voice, almost like she knew she didn't have much time left.
And tragically, she didn't. Her death was sudden. But when you read the memoir, it almost feels inevitable. You see how all that loss and the pressure of expectations just took their toll.
But what's amazing is that From Here to the Great Unknown doesn't end with despair. It leaves you with this feeling of hope of how strong the human spirit really is.
It's like Lisa Marie saying, look, life is messy, it's painful, it's unpredictable. But even in the dark, there's beauty, there's love, and there's always a reason to keep going.
I think that's the message of her story. It's not about being perfect, it's about being human. It's about accepting who we are, finding strength in our struggles, and never giving up hope even when everything feels like it's falling apart.
If you want a book that will challenge you and inspire you and stay with you, I can't recommend From Here to the Great Unknown enough. It's so much more than a celebrity memoir. It's really about how strong the human spirit can be.
And it reminds us that everyone has a story, a journey that's worth sharing. Lisa Marie's story ended too soon, but her voice is still here offering comfort, wisdom, and a look inside the heart and soul of a woman who lived life her own way.
And that's where we'll leave you today, with Lisa Marie's story echoing in your mind. We hope this deep dive made you curious and maybe even inspired you to explore the world, from here to the great unknown. Until next time, keep searching, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep listening.